anger. And the anger feels less directed at the Ukrainians here, as I assume the government would want, and more directed at the government. I want to talk about a interesting thing that happened to the Russian military over the last 48 hours, and the reaction the Russians have had, which has been, I'm on fire. From Igor Girkin to just the random Russian military telegram poster, has all been in an outrage over the Ukrainian HIMARS strike on a base that the Russians were using that became a complete disaster for them. So during the new year, when everybody was popping champagne and while the Russians were bombing every major city, on New Year's Day, in the Donetsk region, there was a strike on a Russian base, on a Russian location, which was actually like a school in the Donetsk Oblast, near the city of Donetsk. And in this school, apparently, not only was there Russians in it, and a lot of Russians in it, but a lot of Russians died. Like, we're talking like hundreds. We're not going to get the exact numbers, but I've heard things like ranging from like 200 to 600, and like the injury is like, it's crazy numbers. We won't know exactly what it is. Just know it's in the hundreds, and it's not good for the Russians at all, right? But there's like a range of like 2 to 3 to 600, right? That's the range. Now, some people are asking, why is it that so many Russians died from a single HIMARS strike, where they all just bundled up together? Like, little, like, I don't know, what's something that bundles up together? Like gerbils? Do gerbils bubble up together? I don't know. I assume squirrels do during the winter. Why is it that this happened? How did this happen? Well, apparently, the building where they had the people staying, a lot of the people, was also the same location that they were storing tons of ammunition, and the ammunition was under all the people. And so when the HIMARS hit the school that the Russians were using as a base, a cue hypocrisy over the Amnesty International report, whatever, that's a totally separate thing. It just basically was like throwing a match in at a gas station, and it just kaboom, killed tons of people. Now, there's a few like reasons you could try to be charitable to Russian command here. A few ways you could do it. The most uncharitable take is that Russian incompetence and the Russians not caring about their soldiers at all led to them just saying, I don't care if HIMARS kills blah blah blah, right? It is what it is. It's just the old Russian military doctrine of not caring about its casualties. There is a more charitable interpretation here of, as the HIMARS strikes have continued to intensify across the country, the Russians have desperately tried to move around the ammunition to these new locations, possibly this being one of them, in a desperate attempt to try to keep logistics functioning. Maybe that's the case. Who really knows? I honestly lean more towards the former than that, but I want to be somewhat charitable when discussing how the Russians came to this conclusion. But you know who wasn't charitable as to why the Russian government basically just took a bunch of their conscripts, put them next to basically tons of dynamite and said, sleep here, when they know that HIMARS target ammunition storage locations? Russian military bloggers and Russians were very, 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 very mad about this, because a lot of people died, and if the ammunition was not stored there, a lot more would not be dead. So I wanted to go through with you guys some of the reactions to this from Russian military telegram, Russian military groups, Russian politicians, Russian military type people, whole shebang. But these people, and this is the important part, pro-war, want Russia to win. And that's the important part when you listening to how they're talking about the government here. Okay? This is from Redovka. This is channel blah, blah, blah. It toes the Russian line. And that's basically all the people on this list is going to be people who toe the Russian line. But listen to how they talk about the government and how they acted here. The information about the tragedy was confirmed. On New Year's Eve, enemies from the MLRS fired at the local vocational school where the military was stationed. Military correspondents began to confirm that the information about the monstrous event was in Makiivka. In the building of a local vocational school, military personnel were quartered, according to some reports, mobilized. On New Year's Eve, literally at midnight, a massive blow was dealt to the vocational school from the American MLRS HIMARS. By the way, waiting till midnight is a hardcore hater move, just gotta say. There were dead and wounded. The exact number is still unknown. The building itself was badly damaged. The fact of where the personnel of the unit was stationed caused massive criticism from military correspondents and experts. An object that is unsuitable for the safe presence of the military in it, not equipped with shelters, is an easy target for an enemy located at a close distance from the location. The decision to deploy soldiers there is assessed by a number of experts as a crime. As a crime. Wow. My goodness. A crime. Here's another one. I don't know how many people were injured. 2, 3 were killed. Although they say much more. There is no difference. A tragedy in any case, so why? And here are the questions. Where are the services involved in the deployment of personnel? Why do we have a commander who already has a lot of responsibility, in addition to being a reaper, a reader, and a player on the pipe? In our country, ammunition is sometimes unloaded anywhere and stored under. And people are more important than ammunition. If we are driving troops, then we need to think about where to place them. There must be specialists for this. They're just talking about like the basic existence of like logistics. How much has already been said? We have an operating plant that manufacturing tunneling shields. It works like this. An underground unit is going in, leaving behind large concrete trucks, dig up huge, yada yada. You get the idea. But they're complaining about, the lack of logistical capability. Next one. Regarding the strike on the vocational school, local reports that the blow was delivered exactly at 1 our time. According to my information, the enemy once again used the MLRS provided by the United States. Apparently, the high command is still not aware of the capabilities of this weapon. Damn. I hope that the perpetrators who made the decision to use this facility will be punished. In the Donbass, there are enough abandoned objects with strong buildings and basement where you can disperse the placement of personnel. And if everything is busy, then for a long time it was possible to dig bunkers with mine construction equipment. And the thing is, all of this is like it. Let's listen to one more. The guilty will not punish themselves. They will continue to send people to be slaughtered and their sons to the Caribbean. I suppose he subscribed to Shoigu and her fitness boyfriend. No? And he's talking about the people who led to the situation in the first place, like the Russian high command, the Russian politicians, Russian military. And why? Convelations are not enough to add 2 and 2. I'm sorry if I pronounced the word wrong. While Donetsk historians and pianists are sent to storm Ukrainian fortifications, Kyusha struggles daily with calories, and her husband squeezes whores and makes YouTube videos about food from restaurants. And you go on, agitate for the Russians to kill Ukrainians in the frozen mud and die at the command of these. And when such make-ups happen, make such a bewildered look that you don't understand anything and call on them to punish themselves. You look very fucking convincing and logical. No, I'm kidding. Not really. My goodness. My goodness, man. One more, and then we got to move on to the Gherkin one. After strikes on large ammunition and fuel depots, the depots began to be dispersed in order to avoid a large loss of material in the events of strikes. This brought results, and the enemy had many times fewer effective strikes on large warehouses. True. This is true. Actually, did happen as the Russians were getting hammered by Ukrainian HIMARS provided by the United States. They did try to disperse their logistical hubs more when it comes to ammunition, so that it wasn't as destructive when they lost one of these ammo depots. Apparently, though, they've gotten a little lax on that. It would seem that a similar approach should be applied to the issue of crowded deployment of personnel within the effective fire destruction of the enemy. But as you can see, despite several months of war, some conclusions are not drawn, hence the operational losses, which, when taken elementary precautions related to dispersal of the shelter of personnel, could not have happened. Incompetence and inability to perceive the experience of war continues to be a serious problem. Peace to the ashes of the dead, and I hope after the story, conclusions will finally be made. And let me just say, there's more. There's more here. You can go through the rest of the thread on your own if you want. It's all the same theme. Incompetence. This is a crime. How dare they? These whores in command. These just anger. And the anger feels less directed at the Ukrainians here, as I assume the government would want, and more directed at the government for the incompetence of holding all these people together at one location, which isn't the first time that they've done it, and I'm going to be honest with you, it won't be the last time they've done it either. And it's understandable that the Russian people would be angry about this, but if you go to war and underestimate your opponent and don't have your logistics in order and have corruption as an issue all top down in your military and haven't done the necessary reforms to, finish modernization before launching a modern war, you can't be too surprised at the result. But they thought, the Russian government thought it would be over in a week. So can you really blame them? Yeah, you can. Anyway, Igor Girkin, known war criminal, former head of defense, I think he was defense minister or defense secretary for the Donetsk People's Republic, and involved in the shooting down of a civilian aircraft during the war in the Donbass, again, a terrorist, he commented on the incident. Now, I've said this about Girkin before. Girkin, as deluded as he is, as hateful as he is, whether it be about homosexuals or any other minority group, or just the deluded views he has about this war, he's more honest than the average Russian commentator. Maybe it's from his personal experience. Maybe it's with the war. Maybe it's just because he has zero shits to give. Or maybe it's because he's completely sniffed his own stuff and he believes every bit of it, and now he's gone high on his own supply. Who knows why exactly he's dishonest? Maybe he's just an honest guy. Who knows? Bad guy, but an honest guy. You can have many different falls. Either way, Igor Girkin seems to, as a high-profile figure, not a high-profile in this particular Russian administration, like he's not like the defense minister of Putin, but he's high profile in the media. At least when he says something, people on the military telegrams pay attention. Definitely since former FSB agent, worked in the Donetsk government of the occupation forces. He comes out and he talks about the hundreds of people who are still under the rubble and talks about why this was so bad, and he goes with the stinging honesty you would assume from Girkin at this point. And remember, you cannot find a more pro-Russian person than Girkin. I received information about the strike on the object around 1 a.m. At New Year's. The facility, which housed the NTH division, consisted mainly of mobilized citizens of the Russian Federation, was almost completely destroyed as a result of the detonation of the ammunition stored in the same building. Insane that they still do this. Almost all the military equipment that stood right next to the building without the slightest sign of disguise was almost destroyed. In terms of the number of victims, there are still no final figures, since many people are listed as missing remain under the rubble. In any case, the number of dead and wounded goes to many hundreds. Approximate numbers of 200s are available, but I will not voice them. I was warned that this could happen again at any time. Let me read that again. Pro-Russian commentator. Somebody who worked as an FSB agent, somebody who believes greatly in this idea of Greater Russia, Novorossiya, and Ukraine just annexing large swaths of territory, somebody who is the most stringent voices constantly saying, if we do not mobilize, we'll lose. Somebody who worked with the occupation as the Minister of Defense, there was the Minister of Defense, for the Donetsk People's Republic, the Russian occupation forces, saying, I was warned that this could happen again at any time. Since this is not the only extremely dense deployment of personnel and equipment in the zone of the destruction of HIMARS missiles. And yes, this is not the first such case. Last year, there were also quite a few of them, although, as a rule, still with fewer victims. But our generals are untrainable in principle. Damn. Although they themselves, after the summer pogroms of caches, prefer to stay away from the location of entrusted troops outside the radius of destruction of enemy missiles. So, this is just one paragraph right here. He says that this can happen again at any time. This is not the only deployment like this. There are other deployments like this within the range of HIMARS, meaning it could happen again at literally any time. He's right? He's saying that this is the first time this has happened. And he's saying that the generals cannot fix their behavior, the untrainable in principle, and that he refers to the HIMAR destruction of their supplies and the supply depots as a pogrom of cliches. Apt description, to be honest. And he says that basically he calls the generals cowards, that they will stay away from these positions in their big offices away from the front. Again, this would be like if like like Anthony Blinken actually no, like if there was an Anthony Blinken for the Donetsk occupation, this would be around that for maybe like 5 or 8 years ago. This is somebody who was in government positions. I can't think of a good comparison because it's really weird because it's like a proxy occupation force, but he was actively involved in the Donetsk government, FSB agent, prominent on social media, especially Telegram, openly saying this, openly declaring it, being brutally honest with his viewers. Let's finish though. Let's finish this. Oh, actually no, that is it. I forgot. This is it. So, walking away from this incident, what can we take away from this? The Russian plan of spacing out their supply depots away from how they were doing it before the introduction of the HIMARS, it has had some success, but as Gherkin notes, the Russians have not completely fixed this behavior, and they probably won't fix this behavior before the end of the war. If you have somebody like Igor Gherkin saying that the generals cannot be fixed when it comes to this, that they're untrainable in principle. And again, it's Gherkin. We're not talking about like Zelensky said this or Biden said this, or it was some like Ukrainian rapper or some like the head of Azov or something. This was said by Igor Gherkin, somebody extremely pro-Russia. If he's saying it, then if you're somebody who supports Russia, I'm not one of them, this should leave you shitting bricks, because it sounds like another big boom like this is ticking down, and it's just a matter of time, not an if and when, and like will it happen. It's just a when, not an if, really.